Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. We have an impressive and diverse set of speakers joining us to discuss an important topic: accelerating Africa's digital transformation, building momentum, crushing barriers, and creating impact. This webinar is the first of a series of 6 webinars on digital transformation across Africa, sponsored by Huawei Enterprise Business Group and organized by the Africa CEO Forum, with support from Dolberg Global Advisors. This series is devoted to business leaders such as all of you in the audience. And we're hoping to, across the series of 6, be able to touch on some of the most important topics within the area of digital transformation. My name is Lillian Kidane. I am an associate partner at Dolberg Global Advisors based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and I will be your moderator for today's event. But before we jump into this session, just a little bit of housekeeping. You will have the opportunity as the audience throughout the webinar to ask questions. Please take a look at the right-hand side of the bottom of your screen where you should see a button and you can submit your questions there during any time this event, and we can ask the guests at the end of the session. We'll also be introducing throughout the session 2 survey questions, and that will allow the audience to answer, and then we will showcase the results on the screen for further discussion. And lastly, please be able to share our interesting insights and comments that you may have throughout the session on Twitter. You can use the hashtag ACF Digital Events. Again, that's ACF Digital Events, as you see on your screen. So great. Today, we're going to have a diverse discussion with our panelists. I'm going to kick off by having our expert tell us a bit about the topic and framing it for us, and then we will dive right in. So our expert today is Karim Koundi. Karim is a partner and head of technology, media, and telecommunication at Deloitte. Karim has over 20 years of management and consulting experience in the field of ICT. He specializes in advising operations and authorities in the ICT sector, excuse me. Great to have you with us today, Karim, and I will pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Lillian, and good afternoon to everybody. And thanks to the Africa CEO Forum for putting together this webinar on this very interesting topic. So maybe just the objective of this quite short presentation of 6-7 minutes is to really provide some trends and the key topics and the highlights on our topic of today, which is about the acceleration of the digital transformation in Africa. And the idea is really to set the scene so that then to keep the word to the panelists, really to go into more details and discuss the different topics so around the theme of today. So maybe next slide, just to start. So maybe first kind of highlight on the current situation. If you look at the current situation of digital in Africa, there has been in the last decade a very strong focus on developing the infrastructure, which is very normal. Today, what we see, it's really it's a high time to also focus on developing the usages and developing, more important, the digital industry, so that Africa doesn't become just a simple kind of consumer of digital, but also an active actor in terms of usage and in terms of industry. If you look at the main, at the key facts today, and if you look from in terms of the digital traffic, the mobile data has grown by 20 times in the last 5 years, even if the access to the internet to the Africans is still less than 30%, and to be precise, it's 27%. If you look at the entrepreneurship ecosystem and developing of the digital and innovation industry, if you look at the ecosystem, it has grown by more than 10 times also in the last 5 years in terms of incubators, accelerators, all kinds of tech hubs. And in front, we still have old, actually, policies. The policies today in terms of legal and in terms of regulatory framework is still not flexible enough and still not adapted to this new sort of economy. Leapfrog is something very specific to Africa. So we see it leapfrogging in many kinds of services. Of course, the most common one is about the mobile money, which is a typical example. In terms of the infrastructure, we saw it also there is a strong leapfrog to the mobile without passing by the fixed networks phase. Another important item is about the financing of the digital industry. The incubation and the acceleration is, of course, very, very important. But in order for the startups actually to survive in this industry, we need to have the right mechanism of financing. And the venture capital is, of course, is the most important one here. So we are not around the classical financing systems. We really need to have the venture financing in a system that is not very spread out around the continent. I mean, if you look at the numbers, and this is a graph, even if it's 2 years old, but if you look, the main point here is that more than 95% of the venture capital is going around only 3 main countries, so, which are Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya. I will explain about the reasons, of course, after about this, but it's an important point. Digital finance, as you know, is becoming really a clear driver of social and financial inclusion in Africa. And last point here is the digital adoption in businesses, and more importantly, at the government levels, is still very slow, especially at the government. When you're talking about digital growth across Africa, only a few governments actually at the end have really implemented digital strategies, and this is really a fact today. So moving to the next slide, if you look at the digital today, it's really a driver that really will foster the inclusive economic growth. So it's really it's a major driver in Africa, and this of course is done by moving into the digital economy. Digital is not only tools, and it is not a sector. It's a new ways. It's a new form of an economy, and that's why it is strongly linked, and it has a strong impact on the economic growth in an inclusive way. An important point here, and that's why I've put this graph at the right side. The challenge number one of Africa in the coming decade is the employment of the young population. If you see here, by 2050, we'll have more than 1 billion of young population before the 24 years old. It's the only actually continent in the world that will see an increase in its youth population. So this is a major demographic shift in Africa, and this will be the main challenge. So this means that we need to create more than 80,000 jobs per day on the continent in order to fulfill the need of all this young population. So the main solution here is, of course, the key point is about the self-employment. Self-employment comes through the entrepreneurship and the innovation ecosystem, where the digital economy can play a major role. So that's a point. In terms of impact on the future economy, I mean, I took the number from a World Bank report on digital in Africa that was published a couple of months ago. Digital in Africa will have an impact of 1.5% on the GDP growth per year. And more important, it will have an impact on the poverty reduction by 0.7% per year. So the link between digital and the economic impact is quite important. Digital finance, as I said, it's a major tool for the social inclusion. So today, mobile money accounts have more than doubled in the last 5 years in Africa. Most important, we have more mobile accounts than bank accounts. With a very low penetration of the banking traditional sector, digital finance is playing a major role today, and there is still a lot of room, because today more than half of the non-banked population has a mobile phone. So there is a lot of room here to play in the digital finance. And last point here that I think is very important about the digital ID. But before talking about digital ID, let's talk about the physical ID, where the penetration or or I would say the completeness of the physical ID of the population is not there yet. A lot of countries today in Africa, they don't have a full identification of its population, and this is quite a major barrier, since if you don't have an ID, you don't have access to the public services, and so it has an impact on social inclusion and so on. So digital ID can be a major also tool or major way to really try to bridge, this gap. And to make again a kind of leapfrog, so moving directly to the digital ID, which can be a much easier way to have the full identification of the population, which is a major point for moving into the digital economy. So moving to the next slide, if you look at the key enablers for the digital transformation in Africa, if you look at the digital economy, actually in the heart of the digital economy, it's all about digital platforms. That's really the center of the digital economy in any situation and in any country or region. Digital platforms at the country level, it's about two things. We have the digital platforms at the government level, of course, with the citizen centric approach. Here are major programs about the interoperability within the government, the digital ID, the information systems within the government, the payment, digital payment. These all are enablers in order to implement digital platforms end-to-end here. So that's the first enabler that is important. Then we have the commercial digital platforms. So this more at business level, how to put in place an intermediation environment where we can sell and buy and make it smooth, have less cost in terms of intermediation. This will enable also to create new type of jobs. So this is all an enabler again to move into the digital economy. Second point, it's about the policies. I won't talk a lot about it, but I think it's quite clear. So modernizing the policies. This is an important point. I mean, a lot of people say, we have policies of the last century, and we want to move to the economy of the next century. So there is a huge gap here today. Policies in terms of digital gov, services. The main point here is that in many countries, digital data and the digital document is not recognized as a legal document. So it doesn't have the same value as a physical document. And this is so it's a showstopper. So this needs to move so at the government level, and a number of countries are really making this move in terms of policies. All the policies related to the entrepreneurship and the innovation environment and how to stimulate that, make it flexible, make it easy for the self-employment, and all these kind of things. A number of experiences around the continent also are put in place. And last but not least, about the digital skills, which is also a major enabler. Digital skills that needs to be addressed at the very early stages. So that the youth, population with a different education approach, not with the kind of traditional approach. And this needs to address, of course, three types of population. We have the users of digital, the business leaders, the one who wants to make business with the digital, and also the tech experts. So three items that needs to be covered here. And this, just to sum it up, these are really the key enablers to moving to the next level and really embrace the digital economy. Next slide. Next slide, which is the last one. I think I wanted to finish with this because I think it's the most important point. Doing all this without a regional kind of collaboration at the African continent level cannot really make us move into the next level. So the regional collaboration in digital economy is extremely important. Staying a kind of fragmented in the markets, it will not help actually to move to the next level. The regional collaboration is important in terms, of course, on developing all kind of infrastructure to make it, so to have all kinds of economies of scales, to make it faster when you have the collaboration at a regional level. But most important in terms of market, the regional market is huge in Africa. As long as we have all the barriers between the countries are put down, and as long as we have a seamless market across the different countries. And this is a major point. If you want to have larger and bigger digital champions in Africa, we need to have the access to the regional market. And this actually, this is the way to also somehow attract the venture capital. If you look, for example, at the Africa Francophone region, that I know, the market is so fragmented. We have a lot of very innovative startups, but since their local market is small, they don't have the ability to attract the venture finance. So if we are with players at the regional level, this also will solve this issue today. Policies as well at the regional level is important. And the last part is about the skills development. I think this point is important at the regional level also for a way to have an exchange of students and people to have an education in digital in different countries. This is important, because it can be a way to develop economic relationships between the countries. I took the experience of like in Europe, of the Erasmus program, which was a way to develop the European, citizen. So why not doing a kind of digital kind of Erasmus in Africa to have an exchange between the students that can really enable this regional market for the future, generation. So that's about my presentation. So I hope I was on time in terms of this presentation. And then I pass the word to Lillian for the next part. And thank you very much for the listening.
Thank you, Karim. You were a little bit over, but we'll catch back up on time. So thank you for the great presentation. Your presentation did touch on a number of very important elements that we will be discussing with the panelists. So discussing digital infrastructure expansion, which you touched on, as well as some headwinds and tailwinds or barriers and enablers of digital transformation, such as skills. So now I'd like to get into the perspective of the panelists, but before we do so, I would like to launch the first survey question to the audience. So you'll see it on your screen now, and the question is, what do you expect in priority from your government in terms of digital transformation? So while you are answering that question, I'm going to go ahead and in the interest of time, introduce our panelists. We have 3 panelists with us, spanning public sector and private. We have, starting with Myriam Said, who is the advisor in the Office of the Prime Minister in Ethiopia and coordinates digital initiatives across the government there. Prior to this role, Myriam was the director of the National Digital Transformation Program under the Minister of Innovation and Technology in Ethiopia, where she led the development of the country's first ever digital transformation roadmap, which was recently ratified, I believe, in June earlier of this year, and to strong applause. So Myriam comes from a private sector background. She was a founding member and partner and director of a digital financial services and payments company. In addition to Myriam, we have Edwin Diender, who is the Chief Digital Transformation Officer at Huawei. He's advising customers and Huawei partners on innovation, business, and growth using digital transformation with a focus on smart cities, safe economics, e-government, and big data analytics for government. He sits on the board of Hero China, an organization that champions women empowerment through education, employment, engagement, diversity, and inclusion. And our third panelist is Serigne BARRO. He's the group CEO of People Input, the first digital agency in Senegal and Francophone Africa, which provides consulting and strategy services within the digital space, which includes digital marketing, such as e-commerce sites, content marketing, web and mobile development, such as mobile applications. So First, we'd like to dive into the first question. So I'd like to hear first how the businesses have been impacted in each of these areas and sectors by COVID-19. So I think we'll start with Myriam. Myriam, we know that Ethiopia's objectives, once the crisis hit, one of the first objectives was to ensure internet access for all. Access for all being defined as both a function of affordability and conductivity. And Ethiopia Telecom, being government-owned and a single player in the telecom space in Ethiopia, was able to move quite quickly. They were able to slash the cost of services, introducing price cuts of up to 65%, tariff reduction for residents on broadband, and 69% for enterprises. And so they also introduced, I think, a stay-at-home package. My question for you with all of this is, though admirable and quite impressive of a move that Ethio Telecom was able to make, do you think that this is sustainable?
Thank you, Lillian. Thank you for the Africa CEO Forum for having me today. I hope everybody is healthy and in good spirits. Thank you for bringing this question up. We have an increased urgency to develop Ethiopia's digital foundation in Ethiopia and I guess across the world. This means for us increasing expansion and resilience of internet networks, making more bandwidth available for government. We didn't have a full lockdown, but students, schools closed. So making more bandwidth available for students was crucial. Helping promote online working and learning was fundamental. In the last 2 years, the Ethiopian government took bold decisions. And one of these decisions were to liberalize and partially privatize the telecom sector. This is a major milestone for a country where telecom services is provided to over 100 million people by a sole government state-owned enterprise, as you said. So in the last 2 years, what Ethio Telecom has done was a lot of work in preparing themselves for competition. That included doing a lot of optimization and upgrades on the network, as well as expanding reach, which allowed them to take this very strategic move to actually reduce costs during the pandemic. It was, like I said, a strategic move, reducing the average revenue per user to stay competitive before new entrants commence services. But to sustain new tariffs, which is a very correct question, which we believe still have rooms to be even more competitive, they will need to look at value add and thus to compensate on loss on voice. So one of the ways to stay competitive and to actually sustain those costs will be to work on the value add side.
And one additional question to that, quite a bit of digital penetration businesses, we're seeing a lot of uptake of their digital services because of this increased access. And so do you see a role with private sector supporting Ethio Telecom or working with Ethio Telecom to be able to sustain this increase in digital penetration?
Definitely. A big strategy, a big strategic move we did, and it's part of our Digital Ethiopia 2025, which is the National Digital Transformation Strategy, is to actually ensure the private sector leads and take the lead on that role. And we've seen a lot of innovative ways of doing it in the last three to 5 months, from service providers expanding internet connectivity to additional services built on the connectivity layers. So, yeah, definitely.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Myriam. And the next question I want to address to, speaking of digital infrastructure, Edwin. So we know that some of the worst hit areas by COVID have been across the continent in urban settings, which has just added to the existing shocks and stresses that these areas are already under. And in recent years, Huawei, in its development of infrastructure, for telecom and other areas has been developing solutions around smart cities, specifically in an effort to improve the operational efficiencies in the delivery of public services by government and government entities. So how have you seen your solutions help cities to cope with these challenges that have been introduced specifically by COVID? And how have you seen your platform as an enabler to crowd in more private sector participation in the development and support of smart cities?
Thank you, Lillian, and thank you for a wonderful way of moderating this. Very efficient. The way we are collaborating now at this webinar, in this forum, and at this panel, I think is a good example of where I would like to start with. If you look at global infrastructures, and if you look at global infrastructures that allow people to work together and share information across teams and departments, then most organizations are using tools exactly like we are using right now. Also, Huawei as an organization worldwide has what we call in place a global collaboration infrastructure. So what we've done inside our own organization is to let our global workforce, whom were forced at one point by government ruling or by lockdowns to work from home, to increase the capacity of this global infrastructure and to increase the capabilities of this global infrastructure to allow our staff to work at home and from home share information across teams and departments as they go forward in their daily work. In addition, we've opened up this global infrastructure that we work with to our partners and our customers worldwide to be able to also work on this similar and same global infrastructure for their daily need, not so much in communication with us, but also in communication and collaboration with their partners and their customers. And on top of that, we also realize that sometimes in some home offices, it's not just, daddy or mommy working from home, but it's also children not going to school. So now also the kids are at home and got to learn from home. So remote office turns into remote learning solutions. So those are examples where we have opened up our global collaboration infrastructure and also allowed family members of our customers and our partners, and also of our own staff, to use and to reuse these collaboration infrastructures for their own need and their own purpose as we go forward. In addition, if we then think about medical specialists, for example, who perhaps are retired and need to join the medical workforce because of the global pandemic, we need more feet in the street, we need more medical specialists available. This global infrastructure becomes not only a remote learning infrastructure for children in their collaboration with school and curriculum and teachers and what have you, but also from perhaps a medical university, medical students, and as I said, retired medical specialists now needing this infrastructure to be a medical specialist remotely. So a clinical collaboration infrastructure and telehealth services are other examples of how our systems and services are being worked on worldwide. Because our global infrastructure is built on the latest and greatest of technology when it comes to artificial intelligence and cloud enablement and all these tech mumbo jumbo, if I can say it like that, for the audience that is maybe not so tech introduced as some of us are. This allows us to reuse this infrastructure and also create online services and mobile services. So for an example, a mobile hospital or an online hospital, or activating a digital hospital. And in some scenarios, some locations have been pinpointed as locations where you have to go first to get a test or to get other things going before you're actually moving physically into another location that is the actual hospital. So converting, for example, great areas or large areas, perhaps like gym rooms, and converting these rooms very fast by using digital technology and creating workspaces that are using cloud and AI technology to become a digital version of a hospital, to relieve the first line and the emergency rooms and emergency response rooms, are other examples of how these technologies work. And then last but not least, there are so many people who need to go in certain and in different places, even when countries and when businesses are open up. And I can give you some example. I am grounded and stranded in Bangkok, Thailand, due to the global pandemic. I got here in March on a business travel, was unable to travel back home, but was able to do my work. The country now opens up, so I'm able to go out. But in order to go in a shopping mall, for example, or go to a theater or a museum or anywhere else, or if I would be a worker, I need to go into a business, into a business or in an office building, physically my temperature is being scanned, and physically I'm getting a sticker on my arm, so the rest of the people around me know that I'm already checked on the way in. We got technology in place, and that's being used, camera technology, thermo scanning, so to speak, that reduces the amount of physical touch, that increases the space that people need to keep from a social distance point of view, and that allows further to be more eased to shorten the line that people are standing in when they're waiting one by one to be checked to go into buildings. These are very tangible and practical examples of how digital technology, not only ours, but the combination of ours and many other technologies combined, create a very healthy and a safe environment to help deal with COVID and flatten the curve.
Thank you, Edwin, on sharing that. So it's interesting to hear that your platform and your capacities have been able then to enable private sector players to also build off of and build use cases off of the infrastructure that Huawei has been building around smart cities. So my next question to Serigne, I know that as a business owner yourself, you have actually had an interestingly great 2020 for your business, and it's been doing well in the wake of COVID. But so can you tell us a little bit about why that is, and what makes your COVID story different from the grim realities that some other digital firms are experiencing?
Thank you, Lillian. So as you said, 2020 was definitely a good year for us in terms of business. A lot of our customers had digital transformation projects in the pipeline, but they did not take time to launch them. With the COVID disruption, they had no other choice to launch this project. As you know, COVID introduces a new era, a cashless, a contactless era. So we worked on impactful digital projects for telcos, for insurance companies, for governments. And what is specific about this era is that it's definitely an era of uncertainty. Okay, so we were anxious at the start of the crisis, and then we changed our mind, and we worked on a business continuing plan and different financial case scenarios to align our costs to the potential revenue decrease. I strongly believe that African entrepreneurs like us have been prepared for this crisis. You know, when you wake up every morning as an entrepreneur in Africa, you think that there is a crisis, even if there is no. So we are dealing with uncertainty and risk in our daily life, and not only in professional life, unfortunately. So uncertainty is the new normal for us. Okay, so we had to be agile. We had to have an optimistic mindset. We focused on KPIs, margin, EBITDA, profit. The best way to survive is to be cash flow positive. You know, we have been in the business for 18 years now. Every 3 to 4 years, we have to reinvent ourselves and to surf on new waves. And definitely the wave of 2020 was everything turning around mobility and monetization services. Okay, and we had a lot of projects regarding these two areas of business.
Thank you, Serigne. So it's good to see that, as you said, if you are an indigenous private sector entity, you always have to be ready to take advantage of the opportunities ahead of you. And it sounds like you guys were definitely ready to do that in this case. So moving forward, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, with whom we'll discuss a bit more in detail her experience and perspectives from a policymaker. But before we do that, I would like to showcase the results of the first survey on the screen. And so what we see here is that fairly decent breakup, but that most of you feel that the priority from your government should be specifically in investment in reliable quality digital infrastructure, which is not a surprise, considering we have heard in previous webinars as well as other conversations that really people expect policymakers to set the foundation upon which innovation and the startup industry can then take root. So with that, I will introduce our guest speaker. The Honorable Madam Minister, Cina Lawson, is Togo's Minister of Ports, Digital Economy and Technological Innovation since 2013. Since joining, she has been an instrumental figure leading the transformative digitization, including interconnecting all public universities and teaching hospitals in the country with high-speed fiber broadband, among other projects, such as professionalizing the email platform for government officials and taking on a digital ID undertaking. Prior to that, she worked for France Telecom North America, which is part of the Orange Group, as well as working in the World Bank's telecommunications and IT department, where she advised various governments on telecom policies and regulatory reforms. Cina has received multiple awards. In 2002, she was named Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. 2013, she was ranked as one of the 25 most influential women in business. And most recently, in 2018, she received the Harvard Alumni Public Service Award, the first African woman political figure to receive this distinction. Please welcome our guest speaker, the Honorable Cina Lawson.
Hi, Lillian.
Hello, hello, Minister. Good to have you with us. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you for the Africa CEO Forum and to invite me for this webinar. I think these are very, very important subjects, and I'm very happy and honored to be here today.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'm just going to dive right in. I know that since you've joined the ministry, you have been doing quite a bit to push these reforms, one of which that has been quite visible and dear to you has been around the expansion of social protections and government-to-person payments through Novisi cash transfer program. Can you talk to us a little bit about why that was such a priority for you at the time, and how you see that your early investments in that being helping the government in terms of being able to address some of the challenges that are around this pandemic?
Yeah, so the Novisi program is a cash transfer program that we launched to respond to measures that we took to protect the citizens against the COVID-19 pandemic. So to give you a bit of background, Togo had the first its first COVID case, I think, early on March 6th. On April 1st of this year, the president has decided that we needed to be under a state of sanitary emergency voted by the parliament. And 8 days after his speech to the nation, we launched a cash transfer program destined to support the informal sector. And what is innovative, and the Novisi program is really this cash transfer program. So what is innovative about this program? It's first the speed of execution. The fact that we wanted to make sure that we respected physical distancing measures. So from onboarding to receiving the funds, everything was digital. And I think that was a first in terms of speed of execution, in terms of making sure that people got the funding, in terms of traceability, also in terms of women receiving a little bit more, 15% more in terms of payouts than men. So the Novisi program lasted for 2 months, and 1.3 million people registered to become beneficiaries, registered using a USSD platform. What is important in understanding what a USSD, it's a short code. You know, when you dial star a short code hashtag, it's a platform that you can access without having an internet connection. So it means that you can really address the poorest who may not have access to the internet, or who don't have smartphones. Through your good old phone, you can have access to the platform. So the results are 1.3 million people registered. There were 570,000 beneficiaries. We spent $20 million paying the informal sector, and these people received approximately 1/3 of the minimum wage. So what is important to understand is that we use this cash transfer. It was an innovative program, very efficient, very well understood, and by the citizens. So it's one example of what we've done to respond to the COVID situation.
Wonderful, thank you. And a question around the infrastructure you had to build to be able to then introduce the use cases. You've actually done quite a bit of work in being involved. I think the accomplishment of installing 250 kilometers of fiber network in the capital city of Togo, Nome, which has been able now to connect some of these public services, which are important for both the education side and access to critical services for this population. Yes. What do you see as no regret investments or solutions, not only for Togo, but that other African countries should be doing to ensure improvements in digital literacy that can see positive outcomes from these large investments?
So first, won't surprise you, it's fiber infrastructure and 4G and maybe 5G in the near future. I mean, first and foremost, we need to improve and again to invest a lot in infrastructure, but this should not be done by the state. Every time that we had to intervene, it was it was because of a gap in situation, or the private sector was not interested in doing it, or there's always a special situation to justify the state in investing in infrastructure. What really makes sense is to do it through a public-private partnership so that we take on what is not interesting for the private sector. So that's my first point. The second is that if I look at the programs that we set up, we always need to have some kind of terminals. You know, you need to have phones. So I have a very good understanding of this very issue of how do we get phones to the entire populations. Our objective would be that in the next 18 to 24 months, that every Togolese citizen has access to a phone, a mobile phone, and of course to an internet connection. So number one, infrastructure. Number two, have access to phones because you need to connect to the infrastructure. And number three, I would say that Karim said something that resonated in me, which was that we need to have digital ID. So one of the major projects that Togo is going to launch in early 2021 is it's the biometric ID project. In order to identify all the citizens. And why? Because again, one point much to Deloitte's point, what we need to build as governments are government platforms. And the first layer has to be, there is a basic layer, which is the infrastructure layer, but on top of this layer, the first layer should be the biometric ID. And then on top of this ID, you create services that are, you know, better targeted because you actually have an opportunity to identify citizens, so you know who they are, you know what their needs are, and you can design better policies.
Thank you, Minister. And one last question. I know that obviously Togo being part of the ECOWAS community, what is your view on the role that ECOWAS could potentially play, the top 2-3 priorities that it should have in terms of encouraging or being involved in driving regional integration, and specifically in the digital infrastructure?
So the first thing that we should move away from is to work in silos. Today in ECOWAS, very often we still work country by country, so it doesn't work. So I would say interoperability, interconnection, and harmonization of legislations and regulations. And so in terms of interconnection, we need to interconnect physical infrastructure again, but we also need to interconnect and have interoperability of applications and platforms that are currently being designed by governments. Talking about, for example, digital IDs and biometric IDs, we need to find a way to connect them to other countries, because we need to make sure that ECOWAS citizens can move freely. So today it's the case, but you have to stop at the border. Imagine that if we could interconnect our IDs platforms, then it would enable greater mobility within the ECOWAS region. So a lot of the work that we do these days is that when we design policies that have impact, not only national impact, but regional impact, we also create working groups to make sure that we get to the point where we can actually work together.
Wonderful. Minister, thank you so much for your time and for that information. And we will now let you go and get back to our panelists. So we are running, thank you. We're running a bit behind on time. So we're gonna quickly get into launching the second survey question. You should see that popping up on your screen. And that says, does the company organization of which you are a member have an institution-wide digital transformation strategy? And I will let, as the audience, answer that question, go back to our panelists. Again, panelists, please keep your responses short. So the next set of questions that I'd love to dig into, just following on to from what the minister was just discussing, is around digital infrastructure, both hard infrastructure as well as soft infrastructure, such as skills, and the topic of innovation, and what the role of these different inputs are in terms of developing out the digital ecosystem. So I'm going to start with ladies first again. So with Myriam, can you talk to us a little bit about the reforms in Ethiopia today? So Ethiopia has been undertaking a number of reforms that His Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed has been introducing, and one of them being communicating that digital is going to be an enabler for the country's economic agenda moving forward. What would you say would be the top 3 priorities in Ethiopia to developing both the hard infrastructure and the digital skills and innovation needed to support startups and digital businesses to propel digital penetration forward?
Indeed, Lillian, comprehensive and sweeping political and economic reforms have happened in the last 2 years. Maybe just a quick background, and I'll be very short on our economy. For nearly a decade and a half, the Ethiopian economy registered strong growth of about 10.5%. Agriculture was the growth engine, and then we went to industrialization until service gradually took over. While all of that needs to continue, the economic model PM Abiy administration inherited had severe macroeconomic imbalances. So among the macro policies reforms included shifting from a government-led economy to a private sector-led economy, whereby private sector participation in state-owned enterprises such as telecom and energy is now allowed. So from an infrastructure perspective, and specifically for telecom, the government has made significant progress, like I said earlier, by enacting laws that liberalize the telecom sector and by establishing an independent agency, a regulator for the sector. So the current top priority here is to have in total 3 licenses by Q1 2021, as well as divesting 40% of the state monopoly, Ethio Telecom. Starting end of September, the regulator will also be issuing several individual licenses, such as value-added services licenses, data center licenses. We have an IT park ready to receive investors for interested parties and to expand the digital economy. So in terms of soft infrastructure, and to keep it short, Digital Ethiopia 2025 defines that creating an enabling ecosystem is important. So access to finance, digital skills. We have raised over $100 million for digital startups. We are in the process of enacting the Startup Act. So we have organized competitions for innovation, one that has actually been championed by our PM.
Thank you, Myriam. Yeah. Great. So moving on, and again, I'm going to ask panelists to please keep it short, or I will have to interrupt you. Edwin is the next one. Edwin, what would you say to an audience who says that global players are not doing enough to push to develop out the hard infrastructure and skills, that companies such as Huawei should be investing more and doing more? What would be your response to that kind of feedback?
Well, the first response is, and I'm very happy for the encouragement, because we think we already do a lot. So if the world out there thinks that we're not doing enough, then I would absolutely applaud it. One of the things that we not only have in mind, but really put in place when it comes to digital foundations, so to speak, is to make sure that within now and 2023, 500 million extra intelligent connectivity opportunities are activated, which means 500 million extra opportunities for devices, infrastructures, digital services, or maybe even people are able to be connected to a global broadband infrastructure that allows them to access all these kind of services. And again, we think we already are moving forward pretty fast. So thanks to whoever thinks we're not moving fast enough. But this digital foundation is absolutely needed to accelerate what the minister was saying and what others are also saying, funding and financing, public-private partnerships, and to bridge the knowledge gap. One of the things that we have in place are a lot of technology to support kids in school, but also grad students to be part of a knowledge community where the latest and greatest is being shared, that is enabling tomorrow, and which is not technology that's been explained, that has been developed yesterday. So from a sustainable point of view, I think we're on the right track as well. So thanks for the encouragement. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Edwin. And moving on to Serigne, what would you say to the arguments that people would say that, you know, being able to encourage homegrown indigenous businesses in the digital space that can help to develop out the innovation needed, that is for Africa, by Africa, this idea of digital sovereignty. Do you believe in the idea of governments providing a protectionist approach to industry to encourage local businesses to develop in the innovation space? Or do you follow the thinking that, you know, without allowing major players to come in, we will not be able to learn from them and have knowledge transfer that would allow us to leapfrog forward?
Thank you, Lillian. As you said, we are definitely facing an issue of technology sovereignty. We are the biggest consumers, but we are not producing anything in our market. I mean, very few things in our market. When you take the top 3 or 5 most downloaded apps, for example, in our market, most of them are Western. Okay, so you will have Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp. WhatsApp is installed on 90% of the smartphone users in Africa. Okay, so when are we going to have our own WeChat? Okay, messaging with all the features included, mobile payment, transfer, invoice payment, e-commerce, but with all these services tailored to our African needs. It's a big issue for us. We think that when we create value, a part of this value must stay in the country. Okay, I'm sure you followed what happened in what Facebook tried to do in Brazil regarding the launch of mobile financial services inside WhatsApp, and the central bank asked them to stop, okay, because they didn't have the license to do this kind of services. Tomorrow we can have the same problem in Africa. If Facebook partners with a global Pan-African bank, they could compete with local players in the mobile money ecosystem. Okay, so for me, the government must take 2 actions. The first one should be to put entry rules in the market to force international players to sign joint ventures with local players. Okay, we need partnership with all these Western international players to be able to build together something relevant for the market. The second thing is to give access to public markets. Okay, the biggest market supplier, business supplier in all our countries is the government. There are a lot of things to do in e-gov projects. All these governments must work with the local players, consulting firms, IT firms in the market.
Great. Serigne, thank you for that answer. And in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and showcase the results of the second survey. Overwhelmingly, the answer is yes, which is good news, I think, for us on the continent. And that indicates that companies and organizations and government bodies are indeed also sharing and seeing the priority of the need to have digital transformation roadmaps within our own organizations, which is great. So we want to take a couple of questions from the audience that we will then pass to some of the panelists. And the first one I have here is asking about roles and responsibilities. So someone is asking, and I will give this one to Serigne, I think. What do you believe is the role of private sector in supporting governments to reach targets of access and equality?
For me, the private sector is key in terms of strategy. Okay, we must find a win-win partnership with the government. As I said before, the biggest business in our countries are government projects, e-gov projects. So we must find a way to work together in a win-win collaboration to be able to provide what our markets are expecting in terms of digital tools, digital services, digital futures.
Thank you, Serigne. And the second question we have is from Netzanet Raya, which asks, how can Africa mitigate the problem of infrastructure and skilled human capital that affects the move to digital economy? And I will pass this one to Edwin. Keep the answer short.
I'll try my best. We as an organization truly see that there is a gap between where knowledge is available today and where technology that is available today and serves for tomorrow is built on other baselines, if you like. We have put in place several programs under the umbrella of Tech for All, as we call it. And under this umbrella, we are adding different programs to bridge this gap and to close this gap by bringing the way we innovate and the way our innovation stack from a technology point of view is captured in curriculum and can be brought to a broader group of people. Firstly, the ones to create awareness, so who doesn't know about it, but can have a starting point, so to speak, but the ones who are more advanced, technical university, grad students, for example, to give them the latest knowledge that we already have in different forms of partnerships. A 5G knowledge truck, for example, is driving throughout, or has been driving throughout the African continent, even during the pandemic, and still drives, and opens up and lets people in. And we're explaining and teaching basically how 5G technology works, where it fits, where it differentiates, and how it overlays, so to speak. But the same goes for ICT academies, the ICT competition that we've done. And another program is called Seeds for Future, which is where physically speaking, we would bring students to China and back, so a student exchange program, but because of the pandemic, it's a completely digital and online track, a curriculum, which is for 2 weeks. You can join it and you can graduate on it and you can collect and embrace more knowledge. I think these are very tangible and very practical, but also very, well, the first steps forward in really bridging that knowledge gap.
Thank you, Edwin. So the last question we're going to have is for Myriam, and this is from a panelist session. She asks, how will we bridge the gap between private sector agility and competency and public sector limitations and experimentation around technology? Myriam?
Okay, sorry, I lost you in between. You said private sector agility and government?
Agility and competency and public sector limitations and experimentation around technology. Okay,
sure. So, yeah, what I think we will have to have our roles defined. In Ethiopia, we're in a transition period. Government had more of a risk manager role. We are now learning to become a development enabler. So from the government perspective, we will need to spearhead the transformation journey with utmost consistency, establishing the foundations. And I think the minister has touched upon it, having the foundations of the digital economy. So the IDs, the digital ID, the payment infrastructures, the sandbox approaches for innovation. And the private sector will have to adapt from a mindset perspective, first of all, and they will need to lead and see beyond the challenges and work with us in ensuring we all succeed. So their agility will complement our new approach of doing business or doing policies, for example. Our Startup Act, for example, one of the big change will be providing innovators or ecosystem enablers access to regulatory sandboxes.
Great, thank you, Myriam. And we're gonna ask the last question to Serigne. This is from Simon, and he asks, what role could digital advancement play in the role of entertainment as people are constrained in their homes and vulnerable to psychological disorders like stress and depression?
I think digital is already providing a lot of services in this entertainment area. Okay. Currently, I think that during the COVID restrictions, a lot of people spend their time streaming. All the streaming platforms have increased. It was a big opportunity for Africa. I think during this COVID restriction period we had, a lot of content producers provided very interesting content on streaming platforms, mostly video and audio. And yeah, I think that this kind of services can help to help us entertain and to enjoy during this tough time.
Great. Serigne, thank you. And we're over time by 2 minutes, so I believe it will wrap up here. I'd like to thank all of the guests for joining us today, the panelists, the audience. I'd like to remind you all that our next webinar in this series of 6 will be coming up on Thursday, October 8th, and it will be entitled, as you see on your screen, Profiting from Data-Driven Innovation. I'd also want to take this opportunity to announce that the Africa CEO Forum is also organizing its first ever 100% digital event dedicated to African family-owned businesses. It will bring together more than 150 of Africa's most influential family businesses that will gather online on October 1st and 2nd. And we'll have prominent families represented. Some among them are Darshan Shandaya, Patrick Bituturi, Wided Bushamani, Alain Montu, and Kate Fatso, and many more. So the registration is open, seats are limited, so please register quickly. Thank you all again for your attendance. Big thanks to the panelists and our guest, the Honorable Minister, and we hope to see you all on the next webinar on digital transformation. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.